Bobby Ballinger Jr. is married into a family connected to the Duggars by marriage, not blood, and that single fact almost kept his name out of the headlines completely. He's the son-in-law of Terry Forsyth, the man who owns Fort Rock Family Camp. His wife is Megan, sister of Austin Forsyth, who was married to Joy Anna Duggar. That's the thread that ties him to a family already under a microscope. A dispatch call came in, a child sexual abuse allegation was logged, a name was attached to it, and then just weeks later, the case was closed as unfounded. Before we get into how that happened, hit subscribe right now because this channel tracks exactly these kinds of investigations as they unfold, and you do not want to miss where this one goes. Before any paperwork existed, there was a phone call. A woman, refusing to give her name, told the dispatcher she'd known about something for almost a month before she finally picked up the phone. She said she was close to the family, close enough that she was terrified of being identified, close enough that she knew details most outsiders never would. She said an adult relative had confided in her that this relative claimed Bobby Ballinger Jr. had inappropriately touched several of his daughters over what she estimated to be somewhere between 2 and 6 years. She wasn't certain of the exact span. She said even the people who told her weren't sure, because some of the children involved had been too young to track time the way adults do. She told the dispatcher something else, something that's the real engine of this whole story. She said the children had been instructed by the adults around them to deny everything if anyone in authority ever asked. If you're keeping score, that's not just an abuse allegation. That's an allegation of a cover-up running parallel to it. According to the caller, Ballinger had already apologized to the family, not to police, not to any outside authority, to the parents directly, and in exchange for that apology, she said, the family agreed among themselves that they wouldn't go to law enforcement. That's the arrangement she was breaking by making this call. She told the dispatcher she felt sick doing it, that she didn't want her name attached to anything, that the families were too intertwined, too close, and that she was afraid of what speaking up might cost her. But she said something worth sitting with. If she didn't say something, she didn't think anyone else would, and the kids wouldn't have anyone speaking for them at all. So she gave the deputy a location, a name, and just enough detail to get the case opened, then said she couldn't be reached again. Here's where it gets strange. Rather than going straight to the man named as a suspect, the responding deputy called Terry Forsyth, the camp owner and Ballinger's father-in-law, asking for contact information for the parents involved. Terry wouldn't hand it over. He told the deputy he'd have the parents call back the next evening, around 6, when he himself would be available. Think about that sequencing for a second. The sheriff's department already had its own records for these families. They didn't need Terry as a go-between. By looping him in first and letting him control exactly when the affected parents would respond, the timeline of who knew what when shifts considerably in his favor. Then comes the line that really stands out in the recording. When the deputy called Terry back the following night, before being told a single specific detail about what the allegation even was, Terry said something close to, "Whatever this is, it has to be a mistake. There's nothing going on here." Nobody had told him what this was yet. He denied something before he knew what he was denying. Maybe that's nothing. Maybe that's just nervous instinct from a man who knows his family is constantly under public suspicion. Or maybe it's something else. That's for you to decide. Between the original dispatch call and the moment investigators actually sat down with any of the children, roughly 9 days passed. In that window, according to the available records, investigators never appear to have interviewed Ballinger himself. Not once. No statement, no denial on record from the man actually named. What they did do is interviewed groups of the children, first a set of 3, then later 2 more. Every single one of them denied that anything had happened. Under Arkansas procedure, that's often where everything stops. If children don't disclose abuse during a forensic interview, investigators frequently have no further legal path forward. No disclosure generally means no probable cause, and no probable cause means no case. So on paper, after children who, if the original caller is to be believed, had already been coached for weeks to stay silent, the report was closed unfounded. If you want to see how this compares to other reports that got buried in similar communities, there's a deeper breakdown linked at the end of this video. This word gets thrown around like it means innocent. It doesn't. Unfounded, in the language investigators actually use, means that with the evidence collected at that specific point in time, there wasn't enough to substantiate the claim. It is not a finding of innocence. It is not a finding that nothing happened. It simply means the case, as it stood, couldn't move forward. And that distinction matters enormously here, because the entire allegation included a built-in explanation for why no disclosure would happen. If the caller was telling the truth and the children really had been told to deny everything, then a forensic interview producing total denial isn't evidence the allegation was false. It's potentially evidence the cover-up worked exactly as designed. Picture for a second what this means if even part of the original tip was accurate. If a parent in this situation genuinely wanted to protect the child from a predator, all they would need to do, according to this case, is instruct that child to say nothing during one interview, one denial, and in many cases, the investigation simply has nowhere left to go. That's not a flaw specific to this family. That's a structural gap that anyone determined to hide abuse could exploit, anywhere this kind of protocol applies. And it raises the obvious question: what's the actual point of allowing an adult, a relative, a neighbor, anyone, to report on behalf of a child, if investigators won't act unless that exact child eventually says the same thing themselves? If stories like this make your blood boil even a little, drop a comment, because I read every single one. The original reporting on this case included a personal comparison worth mentioning. The person covering it shared her own brush with the system, in a different state entirely, to highlight just how differently these cases can be handled. She described being reported anonymously herself over a completely fabricated claim involving her son who has special needs. In her case, investigators didn't just take her son's word for it. They came to the home, examined him physically, interviewed the nurses present in the house every day for hours, interviewed her, and interviewed people around her, all from one anonymous tip, with zero cooperation required from the caller. Her point wasn't that the experience was traumatic, although it was clearly disruptive. Her point was that even with nothing to go on but an anonymous call, that system still showed up and dug. Multiple adults were interviewed. Physical evidence was checked. It wasn't simply ask the child, accept the answer, close the file. Compare that to what happened here, where the named suspect reportedly was never interviewed at all, where the gatekeeper to the family controlled the timeline, and where the entire case lived or died on whether frightened children would break months of alleged coaching in a single sit-down. So where does that leave us? We have an anonymous tip detailed enough to include specific names, specific relationships, and a specific description of an alleged cover-up already underway. We have a gatekeeper who denied wrongdoing before he was told what the wrongdoing even was. We have a named suspect who, as far as the available records show, was never directly interviewed. We have children who denied everything in a system that allegedly required almost nothing more than that denial to close the door. And we have an official record that now says simply unfounded. Unfounded doesn't mean cleared. It means the door isn't fully shut either. Bobby Ballinger Jr.'s name now sits in the system permanently. If another report ever surfaces, if any future victim ever comes forward, if any new piece of corroborating evidence ever emerges, this case becomes part of the record investigators can build on. For now, that's all it is: a name in a file, a question mark instead of an answer. If you want every update on this story the moment it breaks, subscribe and turn on notifications, because I will be covering this the second anything new comes out. Arkansas isn't the only state that handles these reports this way, and if you live somewhere else, I want to know how your state compares. Does a single denial close a case where you live, or does it take more digging than that? If you've ever watched a report like this quietly disappear in your own community, I want to hear that story in the comments too. Thank you for watching. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next update on this case, and I'll see you in the next one.